to your people. God knows I can't do it myself because
Because we can't arrange coffee.
the meeting is live streamed.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay.
Got it.
Right. Good morning, everyone. And welcome to the Mayor's Council meeting of October 25th, 2023. I want to call this meeting to order. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge with respect and gratitude the Indigenous nations on whose treaty and unceded territories we're fortunate to live, work, and operate. First item is the adoption of the agenda. Move, seconded. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Approval of the public meeting minutes. Moved and seconded. All those in favor, opposed, carried. All right, we'll move on to public delegates, and we have one for today, Mr. Nathan Davidovich, and you have 3 minutes once you get yourself set up there.
Sorry. So I'm speaking on item 5.1, TransLink submission to the Provincial Special Committee to review passenger-directed vehicles. You should ask for comments from all municipalities, but especially Vancouver, because Vancouver has the Granville Mall. There are about 1,200 buses a day on 8 different bus routes. And the Granville Mall bylaw does not allow rideshare TNS vehicles to travel on the mall, but they do, and they slow the buses. And your staff has mentioned that it's costing $80 million because of congestion. Well, the city of Vancouver since April 2020 has slowed many bus routes on Powell Street, on Main Street, on Commercial Drive, by allowing street patios 24/7, while previously there was no parking on these streets during the rush hours and the buses moved faster. We should not have buses that move slower than 10 kilometers per hour. People can cycle, run, or walk faster. And it just, I mean, the Granville Mall bylaw actually doesn't even mention TransLink. It still mentions BC Transit. So it shows you how, how old it is. There are 4 recommendations on page 14 of the agenda. However, recommendation number 3, which is regarding accessibility requirement for rideshare, that has been dealt with by the BC government that decided that rideshare vehicles pay a fee for not having accessible vehicles, and that fee is distributed to the taxi companies that are mandated to have accessible taxis. So there's no sense of having recommendation 3, just make things more complicated, and they have a way of doing things now, the provincial government, and they're not going to change it. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your comments. All right, the next item is the report of the chair. I'm gonna keep my remarks brief since we have an important report from the CEO next on the agenda. But I do want to note that last month we launched the next phase of our public engagement campaign to bring the province and federal government on board to help us deliver the Access for Everyone plan. I and others have had really good conversations since that launch with Minister Fleming, which underscores the ongoing commitment that the province has made to work in partnership with us. There's still more work to do to agree on the shape and scope of this partnership, but we do have a process in place to work through this. That's good news and proof that bringing the public on side helps our partners see the value and urgency in working with the mayors. We certainly have more work to do with Ottawa, though. They are distant and don't always understand our local context. A group of mayors will be traveling to Ottawa next month to continue the discussions we started in the spring to help all parties in Ottawa understand the importance of the federal role in supporting the Access for Everyone plan. I know that given Minister Fraser's focus on having more housing built, surely he will see the urgency behind expanding transit in this region as an essential service that is necessary to support that growth. With that, I'll seek a motion to receive my report. So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, opposed, motion carried. All right, that will bring us to the update on TransLink's structural deficit. And I'll turn over to the CEO.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks all for being here today. Good to see you. In my management report today, I'll be providing updates on ridership and on TransLink's financial position. In my last report, I shared that TransLink's ridership recovery has surpassed all other major transit systems in Canada and the United States. We are the 4th busiest rapid rail system and the 3rd busiest bus operator among systems in Canada and the US. And each week, the equivalent of 1/3 of the population relies on our transit system to move them through the region. We've reached nearly 90% of pre-pandemic levels, and many parts of the region have surpassed 100%. This is coupled with extremely high year-over-year ridership growth exceeding 20% in every region. This has been welcome news, and we're proud that so many Metro Vancouverites are choosing to use transit. However, I think we know that this rebound has created a new challenge where customers are now grappling with overcrowding and with the frustration of being passed up by fully loaded buses. To offer a frame of reference, there is 60 to 70% more bus overcrowding system-wide than the same time last year, and it's now worse than in fall of 2019 on every day of the week. Our region was forecasted to welcome 50,000 new residents each year, but over the last 2 years, we've exceeded these projections. In 2022, Metro Vancouver saw over 77,000 new residents, and we're on pace to see over 70,000 again this year. This is the highest rate of growth we've seen since the inception of TransLink in 1999. The current situation demands our immediate attention, and we must be proactive in guaranteeing that our transit infrastructure stays on pace with the growing demand. An issue that we've been raising for a long time, but we can no longer defer, is our current funding model, which directly impacts our ability to expand services. Senior government relief funding, particularly from the province, has been invaluable and appreciated and has allowed TransLink to remain financially stable through the end of 2025. But after that time, there is still no alternate funding model, and the clock is ticking. Our funding model is facing three main challenges. First, TransLink's traditional model of relying on fuel taxes just doesn't work anymore. As you all know, our fuel taxes are based on the volume of fuel used, not the price at the pump. And as drivers make the environmentally friendly choice to switch to electric vehicles, drive more fuel efficient vehicles, and simply drive less and choose to walk, roll, or use transit more, our fuel tax revenues have been flat for a number of years, and they're now starting to decline. And we know they're not coming back. We've been talking about the long-term decline of fuel tax revenue for some years now. We've expected that. What we didn't expect was the sudden impact of inflation, the second pressure on our funding model. In short, our cost pressures are up for all the same reasons as everyone else here in this room. In the near future, we'll also have to incorporate new operating costs from the new expansions of our rapid transit system, namely the Broadway subway line expansion and the Surrey Langley SkyTrain. Finally, our funding model has long heavily relied on transit fare revenues. This part of our funding model is particularly facing huge challenges and changes. Prior to the pandemic, fare revenues were our largest and fastest growing revenue source. And these revenues played a particularly pivotal role in expanding our transit system by 15% between 2016 and early 2020. And during this time, we experienced a remarkable ridership increase of 17% over the course of 4 years. These strategic investments resulted in a better transit system that not only drew more passengers, but also resulted in increased fare revenue, which created a self-reinforcing cycle of further service expansion. Unfortunately, this circle was interrupted in 2020 with the onset of the pandemic. And with plunging ridership and fare revenues, the planned expansion of our system was immediately halted, and fare increases were capped at or below inflation. Fortunately, the fare revenue losses between 2020 and 2025 have been covered by that federal and provincial government relief funding. But that relief funding ends in 2025. And even though we will likely reach 100% of pre-pandemic ridership in the next year, that doesn't mean that we're able to pick up right where we left off in 2019. We constructed our transit system along with the associated operating costs based on the sound assumption that ridership would be well above the levels we were witnessing in 2020 by 2025, given both our fast regional growth and transit expansion. The reality is, although I'm confident that we will return to pre-pandemic ridership levels next year, far ahead of any other large transit system in Canada and the US, we still face a shortfall of 20% or more between our projected ridership and our actual ridership. This shortfall in anticipated fare revenues, coupled with the previously mentioned inflationary pressures and declining fuel tax, have left us with a structural deficit that we must address. Financial analysis projects that TransLink will face an annual revenue shortfall of $600 million beginning in 2026. For perspective, this deficit represents about 30% of our total annual revenues. Simply put, we need a better and more sustainable way to fund transit to ensure we can keep up with the high demand of transit in our region. I want to take a moment and talk about what this means from a customer perspective and really underscore the significance of these challenges. So let's imagine that you ride the Route 335 every day between Surrey Central and Newton Exchange, a route where half of peak direction trips today on weekdays are overcrowded. Buses are regularly jam-packed, and they sometimes drive past you. Why? Because they are completely full. the service becomes unreliable, and you don't know what time you'll get to work, to school, or your final destination, but you have no other choice but to wait for a bus that has capacity for you. As a customer on the 335, you would reason a problem quickly. Choice but to wait capacity for you. As a customer on the become projected growth to expect the customer will look next year or even the year after. The problem is, if we continue on our current trajectory without addressing our structural deficit, we will demand for transit in the areas that are growing and need it the most. And we may even face challenges. And I would argue that levels that should our growing region. Thank you so much for your time today, and thank you as always for your support.
Great. Thank you very much, Kevin. I'll open the floor to any questions or comments. Members. Mayor. Okay, receipts been moved and seconded. There is at least one speaker, Mayor Buchanan.
For your present. I just want to comment. I don't have a question that I think we all want to be moving efficient, but and getting to wherever we're going, whether it's home, work, shop, services. And I think we can all agree we're seeing an ever increasing level of congestion and an ever increasing demand for public transportation services. And I think this council has been clear and has a very strong commitment in wanting to deliver the kind of system that's modernized and gets people where it wants to go. Where it wants to go. That's why I think we have been steadfast and will continue to be in terms of asking and advocating for permanent, predictable funding that meets the needs of today. The challenges are very different than what they were when this organization started, as you clearly outlined. But it needs to meet the needs of the people of today in our region, and the people that we know, as you said, are coming greater than the population numbers are coming larger than what we expected. So I'm happy that we continue to advocate, that we continue to go to our senior levels of government. We do need a more modernized system that's going to work for the kind of system that we need today, but for the future moving forward. So thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Quinn, any?
No, thank you so much, Mayor Buchanan. I think you outlined exactly the challenges that we're facing today: increased congestion, increased demand for transit, increased population growth. We've got to rise to meet those challenges. Thanks.
Thank you.
Just to offer a brief comment, I think it's incredibly important that the public have awareness of what TransLink is facing. Because as Mayor Buchanan articulated, there is that demand that exists in every community in Metro Vancouver for increased service, rightfully so. But the challenge is significant. You've laid out why and how, and as Mayor Buchanan just said, an outdated funding model that this mayor's council and previous mayor's council and the one before that and the one before that and the one before that have raised as a concern with senior levels of government. And for a long time, that discussion has been put off, or it was sent down the path that ensured its defeat. We've run out of that time. There's no more kicking the can down the road. This is a problem that the region and the province have to face squarely head on and fix. Or else not only are we not going to be able to deliver the additional transit that's needed in every city in Metro Vancouver, we're going to decline. And I know that that's the last thing that mayors want. And I know it's the last thing the public wants to see. So I think that this is important that the public understand where the organization is at, the obstacles that it's facing, and the urgency. And I would underscore that word, the urgency for the provincial and federal government to work with us to deliver a new funding model that allows us to meet the needs of our region. The other thing that I know you've spoken about in the past, and I don't want to gloss over, it's important that TransLink be responsible with every dollar it receives. And I think anytime any level of government is asking for additional funding from the public, it's incumbent on them to be able to demonstrate that they are looking inwards to find savings and efficiencies, and are demonstrating that to the public. And I know that TransLink has done that in the past. I know that that's a process that needs to continue. It's an ongoing piece. It's not something that we do once and then we say, oh, we're operating as efficiently as possible. So I've heard from you to this body a commitment that will be an ongoing process and endeavor for the organization. And I think it's important the public understand that as well. It's not just about, oh, we need more money. It's about reflecting internally and making sure that every dollar that TransLink receives is being spent wisely, responsibly, and is being used to deliver the service that people are looking for. So with that, I'll thank you for the report, and we will look forward to the federal government and provincial government. My phone hasn't rung yet, but I know it's moments away. Any other comments, questions? Okay, thank you. There's been a motion to receive. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, opposed, motion carries. It's funny because my phone is ringing now, but it's not them. Jay Trudeau is the one who does it. Yeah, that's right. Okay, next item is report from the Joint Planning Committee, and it's regarding TransLink submission to the Provincial Special Committee to review passenger directed vehicles.
Thank you, Chair. Andrew McCurran, Director of Strategic Planning and Policy, and with me is Eve Howe, the Senior Manager of Policy Development and Decision Analysis. Eve and her team have been leading our efforts to provide TransLink analysis on ride-hailing and transportation network services in order to feed into the provincial legislative review that's upcoming. She'll just give a short couple minutes on our recommendations.
Thank you. So when the province approved the ride-hailing regulations back in 2019, they committed to strike a special committee after several years of operating to review the regulations. And that review is currently taking place now. And so I will focus on some of the key recommendations. TransLink proposes 4 key recommendations to the special committee. Will be going on November 15th. The first one relates to accessing data. So when the province committed to sharing the data collected by ride-hailing companies back in 2020 with public entities such as TransLink and local government. Unfortunately, the data did not actually start arriving into inboxes until earlier this year. And there remain ongoing data quality concerns, which has restricted our ability to conduct analysis and share that analysis with decision makers such as the Mayor's Council here today. This has made it extremely difficult to comment on some of the impacts of passenger-directed vehicles, namely ride-hailing and taxis, on public transit and on congestion. So we feel that because evidence-based decision-making is so critical, TransLink is recommending that the special committee address access to quality data that can be used to support decision analysis with policymakers. The second recommendation relates to greenhouse gas emissions. When the regulations were put in place, there was no particular greenhouse gas reduction components in it. In order for this regulation to support provincial and regional greenhouse gas targets, TransLink recommends that a greenhouse gas reduction framework comprised of both incentives and mandatory requirements be established as part of the Act. and that an industry-wide target of 100% zero emissions by 2030 be put in place. This is in line with Uber's own corporate commitments and other jurisdictions such as New York. The third recommendation relates to accessibility. How the regulation currently works is that each trip performed in a non-wheelchair accessible vehicle is charged 90 cents. And those funds are allocated to programs to equip taxis with wheelchair accessible vehicles. To date, that program is fairly new, so we don't know how it's working in terms of the taxi side of things, but the per trip fee has not created any wheelchair accessible ride-hailing vehicles. There are currently none operating in this region. However, in spite of this, many persons with disabilities are using and benefiting from ride hailing. And we conducted a survey recently that found out that one of the key barriers was a lack of disability awareness training amongst ride hailing drivers who do not have to have the same training as taxi drivers. TransLink is therefore recommending that the province adopt service level and training requirements for all passenger directed vehicle fleets, including ride hailing. And finally, the last recommendation relates to the fact that congestion has been difficult to determine due to the inability to use some of this trip data. But for the most part, management of congestion on streets and curbs has been within the domain of local authority, and that this level of management appears appropriate. So TransLink recommends that the province continue to support local jurisdictions to implement programs to address congestion and encourage public transit. However, as changing technology, namely the arrival of automation and the potential arrival of robo-taxis in the future, these conditions are likely to change and the current tools might not be adequate. So therefore, TransLink recommends that the province ensure that future consultation processes take place with local government prior to enabling automated ride-hailing to arrive in the region. And those are the 4 key recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, someone would like to move the recommendation. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. All right, that will take us to a motion to adjourn to a closed session. It's been moved, seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, we'll take a 10-minute break to change over the room and then we'll begin. Thank you, everyone.
There are now refreshments next door.
Yes, sir.